Kia ora koutou katoa. Ngā mihi nui kia koutou, nau mai, haere mai, piki mai, and thank you for joining me for today for our Coalition Government's first budget. This budget is very much a team effort, and in particular I want to thank the Associate Ministers of Finance, David Seymour, Shane Jones and Chris Bishop, who were heavily involved in putting the budget together. It has benefited greatly from the input of each of you. We have started rebuilding the New Zealand economy with this budget, and there is much more for us to do together. Thank you. I would also like to acknowledge Dr. Caroline McLeish, Secretary of the Treasury, and her amazing budget team who have supported ministers throughout this process. It has been a big job. Thank you. Budget 2024 delivers. It delivers on our key commitments, and it is a budget for New Zealanders who have been experiencing a prolonged cost of living crisis. It's a budget for Kiwis who want to see better frontline services in health and education, who want law and order to be restored, and who want to see some light at the end of the tunnel in this difficult economic downturn. It is those New Zealanders who have been at the forefront of our minds as we have put Budget 2024 together. We are taking decisive action to provide tax relief that gives average income households up to $102 per fortnight, plus Family Boost childcare payments of up to $150 per fortnight. Targeted and affordable investments in public services, with 2/3 of new spending going into health, education and law and order. Enduring savings across government, both to responsibly fund tax relief and to boost frontline services. The biggest part of this budget is in fact investment in public services. Infrastructure investments to lay the foundations for growth and a pathway to get the country back to surplus with lower debt. As you know, Budget 2024 is set against a backdrop of a difficult economic downturn. But with our responsible, careful approach, we are able to see better times ahead. Interest rates have been increased to tackle high inflation, and the subsequent downturn has been deeper and more persistent than previously expected. Treasury is forecasting the economy to pick up in 2024, and its forecasts also show inflation returning to the target band of 1 to 3% later this year, and interest rates falling. So, while times may feel tough for everyday Kiwis right now, the economy will recover and inflation will come down. Our government has a plan to help those things happen. In recent years, government spending has ballooned with little to show in the way of results, and debt has risen sharply. The Coalition Government is committed to getting the books back in order. Despite worsening economic conditions, the government is on track to meet its fiscal objectives of returning the operating balance to surplus before gains and losses in 2027-28, bringing much needed discipline to government spending, including by reducing core Crown expenses towards 30% of GDP, stopping the increase in net core Crown debt and reducing it to between 20 and 40% of GDP. Treasury forecasts a $1.5 billion Obergall surplus in 27-28, and on this chart you can see growing surpluses beyond that in future years. The government's books have been in deficit since 2020, and it will take some time to get them back in order. We cannot fix in one budget the damage that has been done in the previous 6, but we are putting things on the right track. After stripping out large one-off expenses and adjusting for the economic cycle, the Treasury estimates a structural operating deficit of around 1.5% of GDP this financial year. To put it less formally, New Zealand has been borrowing for the groceries. This borrowing has contributed to rapidly rising debt, and you can see in this graph that borrowing has contributed to that rapidly rising debt. In 2017-18, net core Crown debt was under 20% of GDP. It is now over 43% of GDP. The solution is clear. Revenue and expenses must be brought back into balance and debt must come down. The budget begins to put debt on the right track. The government is restoring discipline to spending. We have reduced the allowance for new spending in future budgets and will ensure the spending is targeted, effective and affordable. Fiscal discipline is long overdue, as government spending has exceeded revenue in recent years and the difference has been borrowed. You can see in this chart that core Crown expenses as a percentage of GDP is forecast to drop away sharply in coming years as we rein in spending. We have lowered future operating allowances as part of our plan for more responsible fiscal management. For too long, operating allowances have been set and broken. We are taking a tougher approach, and we know that in order to reach our goals of a surplus and lower debt, we have to be continuing to be careful with every taxpayer dollar we spend. Our operating allowances will be $2.4 billion for the next 3 budgets. Like Kiwi households, we are tightening our belt. Budget 2024 includes new spending, savings, and the reprioritisation of resources to frontline services, all within an operating allowance of $3.2 billion average per annum. This was also the allowance that the National Party campaigned on. It is the lowest operating allowance in real terms since Stephen Joyce's budget in 2017. In this budget, we are doing more with less. Our spending is targeted, effective and affordable. And in this table, you can see our tax relief is fully funded from savings and revenue initiatives. You can also see how we have chosen to invest the $3.2 of new spending in our operating allowance, making clear decisions to prioritise health, education and law and order. And as I said earlier, 2/3 of our new spending is going into those 3 areas. In some cases, such as the medicines budget, funding is plugging holes left by the last government. In other cases, it addresses rising pressure on services. In addition to that, we are investing in disability services, defence, transport and other areas. This has been made possible because of the savings exercise we have undertaken since coming into government, which I'll outline more about shortly. I'm proud that Budget 2024 delivers on our commitment to provide tax relief so hard-working New Zealanders keep more of what they earn. They deserve it. The tax package I am announcing today aligns with the National Party's tax plan with some small adjustments to reflect coalition agreements. On the campaign trail, I pledged that our tax plan would give an average income household up to $100 a fortnight and an average income household with children up to $250 a fortnight. I have kept that pledge. Not every household will get that much, but our package intentionally targets low and middle income families with children, and it delivers what we said it would. The personal tax package is made up of several parts which work together to ensure that the overall benefits are tilted towards low to middle income working families with children. Analysis by Treasury shows that an estimated 727,000 households will benefit by at least $75 a fortnight. 187,000 will benefit by at least $100 a fortnight, and on average, households will benefit by $60 a fortnight, while households with children will benefit by $78 a fortnight on average. So beginning with the changes to the personal income tax thresholds, you can see that we are reducing income tax for people earning more than $14,000 per annum. This is the first time personal income tax has been reduced since 2010. And this shift begins to address the fiscal drag that has built up. Tax rates are unchanged, but tax thresholds move upwards. The next part of the tax package sees an extension to the income limit for the independent earner tax credit, meaning an additional 420,000 people are eligible for up to $20 per fortnight in a boost. We are also increasing the in-work tax credit to give an estimated 160,000 low to middle income working families up to $50 extra per fortnight. This change in particular tilts the benefit of the tax package towards those low to middle income families who are struggling the most with the cost of living. And our family boost payment will give up to $150 a fortnight to an estimated 100,000 families to help them with the costs of early childhood education. A tax calculator will be live today at www.budget.govt.nz tax calculator, so that Kiwis can see how much they can keep in their pockets through our responsible, fully funded tax relief. I want to pay particular tribute to David Seymour. We together explored different ways of delivering income tax in this budget, including looking at how we could adopt the principle of a flatter tax system as advocated by the ACT Party. While there is merit in that proposal, ultimately, by delivering the National Party tax plan, we were able to ensure that no earner was worse off than they would have been in those commitments. And I want to thank David for his cooperation and that good and strong engagement. Tax relief in Budget 2024 is fully funded from savings and revenue initiatives. And I can confirm that because of this, the government is not borrowing to fund this tax relief, and it will not add to inflation. This slide shows how our tax package is funded. Our tax package puts $3.7 billion a year back into the pockets of New Zealanders. The largest contributor to paying for this is $1.2 billion a year of baseline savings we have found through our savings program. And the rest of our tax relief is funded by a range of changes, including closing labour programs, many of which have previously been outlined at our mini budget, depreciation changes for the taxation of commercial buildings, revenue from immigration levies, and replacing the first year fees-free program with final year fees-free. I want to acknowledge that the funding of the tax plan does not involve a tax on foreign buyers, and I want to acknowledge New Zealand First's contribution, both in terms of the policy to make first year fees-free, final year fees-free, but also the investment in tax compliance activities, which generates additional revenue to support our tax plan. A key aspect of Budget 2024 is our savings program. Our line-by-line savings process has generated more than 240 individual savings initiatives for Budget 2024, and these are outlined in the summary of initiatives we've provided for you. Some of those savings are small, others are bigger. Some reduce the amount of funding for an activity, others stop an activity altogether. It all adds up. We set out to find baseline operating savings of $1.5 billion a year on average and in this program we have achieved that target. In doing so, ministers and agencies have focused on lower value programs that didn't align with the coalition government's priorities, and non-essential back office functions, including contractor and consultant spend. The goal of this exercise was to unashamedly shift resources from the back office to the front line, so Kiwis can have better healthcare, education, law and order, and disability services. In the budget documents, you can see what each public service agency has contributed in baseline savings. Some agencies met their targets, some did not. In some cases, ministers chose not to progress savings initiatives because they may have affected the delivery of important frontline services. I'm very pleased that the government has met its baseline savings target in Budget 2024. In addition to this, a small number of agencies have provided targeted policy savings or revenue options. These have raised another $1 billion each year to go towards Budget 2024 and supporting the delivery of frontline services. They include, for example, initiatives to reduce the number of New Zealanders dependent on emergency housing motels. I would like to particularly acknowledge the work of Associate Finance Minister David Seymour in this context. Minister Seymour was a big contributor at the table when budget ministers talked about savings, and he led the process to find savings at the Ministry of Business, Innovation and Employment, which was very successful. Thank you, David. By making savings, we are able to invest in the frontline public services that matter most to Kiwis. This is the point of the exercise. Budget 2024 invests in health, education and law and order, as well as other key services. And we are doing this in a targeted, effective and affordable way. We are addressing pressures in the health system by investing to reduce waiting times, to improve our hospitals and to get Kiwis the healthcare they need and deserve. Our health boost includes critical funding for Pharmac to pay for the drugs Kiwis rely on, but which the previous government did not continue funding. It supports the Gumboot Friday mental health service and gradually extends free breast screening to 70 to 74-year-olds. We are committed to supporting frontline healthcare workers, and I am pleased to say we are already seeing a surge in the numbers employed. In 2024, Health New Zealand has already overseen growth in the nursing workforce of more than 1,000 full-time equivalent roles so far. And senior medical officer numbers have grown by more than 80 full-time equivalents in the first quarter of 2024 alone. We have taken the responsible step to pre-commit health funding for our next 2 budgets, meaning there is certainty for those leading and working in our health system. Make no mistake, boosting funding for health will always be a priority for this government. Turning to education, the government is investing to support schools and early childhood education providers, to build new schools and classrooms, to support schools to teach reading through a structured literacy approach, and to continue the Healthy School Lunches program. This budget includes the biggest boost dedicated to school property maintenance funding in several years. We're fixing up substandard classrooms. We will be training more teachers, we will be establishing charter schools, and we will be relentlessly focused on lifting achievement in our education system. The Coalition Government is committed to cracking down on crime, and Budget 2024 invests in initiatives to keep communities safe. We are investing $2.9 billion in extra capital and operating funding to restore law and order. This includes more corrections officers, more frontline police, and updated police vehicles and tools. We will also be taking steps to address youth offending, including a military-style academy pilot. I want to acknowledge New Zealand First here, because in this budget we are delivering on our government's commitment to boost the police force with 500 additional frontline police. There are many other investments we are able to make in this budget because of our careful, responsible use of taxpayer dollars. These include support for disabled people to access the essential services and equipment they need, boosting our Defence Force pay and upgrading their vehicles, helicopters and infrastructure, delivering 1,500 more social housing places through community housing providers, and supporting the Te Matatini National Festival. I've kept my commitment to Tamapōtaka on that one. I want to turn now to a key part of our plan to grow the economy, infrastructure. Budget 2024 lays the foundations for growth, including through a better performing infrastructure system. More than $68 billion is forecast to be spent on infrastructure over the next 5 years. And this chart shows the extent of our investment in roads, public transport, regional infrastructure and rail. 2024 is set to be a record year for infrastructure investment. We are sustaining an infrastructure pipeline with careful progression of investments in transport, health, education and other critical areas. We have topped up the multi-year capital allowance with an extra $7 billion, and that means there is $7.5 billion available, and we can responsibly fund more infrastructure projects. Our new $1.2 billion regional infrastructure fund will invest in resilience infrastructure and regional projects that support economic growth. I'd like to acknowledge Shane Jones and New Zealand First for their commitment and determination to deliver this fund. Among the first projects to be funded and announced today will be flood protection and resilience projects across the country. This will include upgrades to stop banks and flood walls, the kind of infrastructure that will help build resilience to our changing climate. We are also making a large investment into the National Land Transport Fund to accelerate priority projects, including $1 billion of additional capital over that consulted at the time of the government policy statement. This will support the Roads of National Significance program with more funding, supporting the rebuild and recovery of communities affected by Cyclone Gabrielle and the Auckland floods, and providing funding to improve our rail network. Our investment in transport infrastructure is critical to our plan to rebuild the economy and enable Kiwis and freight to get where they want to go. Looking ahead, Budget 2024 addresses the cost of living crisis for hard-working Kiwis, shifts resources to the front line, invests in health, education and law and order, and establishes the foundations for productive growth. The budget charts a course for recovery. And while times are tough for many Kiwi households, they can look forward with confidence that this government is taking the decisive action needed to get New Zealand's books back in order and get our economy growing again. We are working at pace to deliver the positive change New Zealanders expect and the improvements to public services they need and deserve. This budget is a strong start. It shows what is possible with care and discipline. There is much more to do. I'll take your questions. Mikey?
Kia ora, Minister. First of all, congratulations on your budget. The surplus by 2027-28, how ambitious is that, and will you get there?
We will get there. We're determined to get there because we need to get our books back in balance to start paying down debt. Otherwise, all we're doing is saddling future generations with that debt. We think it's important. What we also note is that it's only possible with more disciplined spending. If we'd stuck to the spending plans of the outgoing government, surplus would not be achieved until 2030-31. That is far too long to wait, and it's why we've taken care to bring more disciplined approach to operating allowances.
How can you be confident your tax cuts will make a meaningful difference?
Because I've knocked on the doors of New Zealanders who've told me their struggles, the people who've said that $20 a fortnight is the difference between them paying their bills or being in overdraft. I've talked to the New Zealanders who've told me they've had to reduce how much milk they buy their kids because they can't make the household budget add up anymore. The tax reduction we're offering is modest, but it is meaningful and it will make a difference. Jenna?
Thank you. What do you say to the pensioners who look at the power couple and see that the power couple is getting much more a week than a pensioner?
I'd say that this is a government that is absolutely dedicated to keeping your superannuation payments rising into the future. And as a consequence of tax reduction, your superannuation payments will rise faster than they would have otherwise. We're also taking steps to ensure there are investments in the public services older New Zealanders expect, including our health system and including expanding, for example, eligibility for breast screening. We are a government that wants to deliver for all New Zealanders, including superannuitants.
Do you think the cancer patients you've broken your promise to will be happy with their $25 a week?
Well, we are really committed to expanding access to cancer treatments, and we regret that it hasn't been possible in this budget. There are significant challenges with the policy of increasing access to cancer drugs because it poses a fundamental change to the Pharmac model, in which traditionally Pharmac selects the medicines that it funds. Regardless, our government is committed to delivering on this policy through future budgets. Dr. Shane Retty, David Seymour are working on it, and those cancer patients will see more drugs funded in future.
Why did you make the promise if you couldn't deliver it?
Well, we are determined to deliver it, and we will.
Minister, me tuku mihi ki a koe. Why have you cut over $300 million from kaupapa Māori initiatives across multiple vote budgets, including the $40 million from the new supply and capability of Māori housing?
We have, across the board, made baseline savings so that we can put resources to the frontline services that all New Zealanders, including Māori New Zealanders, depend on. Māori will benefit significantly, not only from tax relief, but from a better funded health service, from more funding for our kura kaupapa, our kohanga reo, from safer communities with better equipped police. This is a budget that delivers for Māori, it delivers for all New Zealanders.
But this budget does not deliver for Māori. In fact, it's worse. We have lost over $300 million from initiatives like Mana Orite, from Justice, from Jobs for Nature, from strengthen Māori initiatives and partnering initiatives in education. There is a multiple list of budget cuts here directly affecting Māori.
I reject that assertion. Māori have everything to gain from a stronger economy. Māori have everything to gain from lower inflation, lower interest rates, higher incomes, and better investments in the front line. Māori New Zealanders turn up to the emergency room as New Zealanders, and we are making sure those emergency rooms have the funding they need. We're continuing funding for proven service delivery in Māori health, for proven service delivery in our education system. Those are the investments that make a difference to everyday people, and we are proud to be making them. I'd also point out, and Shane, you may want to speak a little bit about this, but our Regional Infrastructure Fund has a specific focus of ensuring that we are getting economic development in our regions with a focus on increasing access to capital for Māori economic development. Shane, do you want to?
The $1.2 billion fund, which is available to you, a key focus in the regions will be moving from co-governance to co-investment, working with Māori entities so that they deploy their own resources in appropriate arrangements with the Crown, and we actually see practical demonstration of rangatiratanga. In addition to that, you will be seeing shortly a piece of legislation come into the House which will enhance Māori prosperity through the aquaculture. And we're confident that the $200 million referred to as flowing out of the Provincial Growth Fund into resilience is going to be in areas where all Kiwis, but in particular Māori landowners, will benefit, because food likes to grow where water likes to go. And we're conscious that this money will flow, subject to Mr. Bishop and I signing the details off ASAP, into the regions, into the businesses of men and women who own infrastructure funds, so that we give greater ballast to our desire to keep the regions powering ahead.
Yeah, I'd also point out that the social investment approach for which we build the architecture in this budget will allow more grassroots organisations, including iwi-led organisations, to take control of the resources that are currently tied up in government bureaucracies. Tova.
Thanks, Minister. How many households will get $250 a fortnight from your tax cuts?
It is difficult to estimate. What we know is that there are around 12,000 households who would be estimated to access the full family boost payment, the full $150, and that will be, and obviously it will be a subset of those households who would receive the full $250. I'm just reaching for some numbers here so I can give you the latest.
I suppose, is it fewer
What
than
we
the
know,
3,000?
Tova, is that 19,000 households will benefit by more than $200 a fortnight.
Okay, is the 250 figure, is that fewer than the 3,000 households that you'd anticipated?
It's greater.
It's greater than. And just to follow up to Jenna's question, what will superannuitants be able to afford with their weekly tax cut of $4.30?
Well, superannuitants benefit twice. First, they will see greater increases to their superannuation payments each year, because those payments are tagged to the after-tax average wage. And because of our tax package, after-tax average wages will grow faster. The second way that superannuitants will benefit is from an economy with lower inflation. Superannuitants have been some of those hit the hardest by the rising cost at the supermarket and with all of their bills. So a responsible budget that is delivering lower inflation is good for superannuitants. Jason.
Thank you very much. I was just wondering if you might be able to expand on this idea that you were fleshing out with David Seymour around flattening the tax scale. Could you give us a timeline about just basically where's your head at with that? Can we expect something for the next budget? And is this an indication that we've got more changes to the tax system coming in the future?
No, because as we've set out today, our commitment in this budget is to get the books back in order. And until we are returning a surplus, New Zealand won't be in a position to deliver more personal income tax reduction. I'm happy, though, to invite David to make a few comments about the approach we took to the personal income tax package in this budget.
Oh, sure. Yeah, look, I thought, first of all, I want to return Nicola's thanks for the engagement that we've had. I believe, and we'll always believe, that New Zealand needs a lower, flatter tax system than it has. I think if we're honest about it, the ambition to reduce spending to do that is greater than is possible at the moment, and therefore we went with Nat's version of tax cuts, which I fully support. Just not everyone's as ambitious as the ACT Party, but hey.
And the $2 billion that you, in terms of the health, the previous government had a lot of trouble actually getting the money out the door. Are you able to give us some assurances that you're able to get the money out the door to the places it needs to be, rather than sitting in government coffers?
Sorry, which funding are you talking about there, Jason?
Just the health. Oh, sorry.
The health funding?
Yes.
Yeah. Look, as you've heard me and the Prime Minister and other ministers say, the first step is, yes, putting that additional funding boost into the health system. But the next critical step is to make sure that health system is operating better, so that those dollars are going to their best use. So Dr. Reti is very focused on enhancing the performance of Health New Zealand. What we want to see is the things New Zealanders want to see. Shorter waiting times in the emergency room, shorter waiting times for specialist assessment and elective surgery, greater immunisation rates for our children. And those things will be achieved with relentless focus. We're a government that is measuring performance, and we have high expectations for what Health New Zealand will deliver with those billions and billions of dollars that we are putting in to boost their service provision. Luke.
In the lead up to the election, both you and the now Prime Minister described the previous government as having an addiction to spending. Core Crown spending is going to go up forecast to go up, I think, another 11 billion this year, and then I think 5 and 6 in the years after. How would you describe the current state of that addiction?
We're weaning off. We are a government that has inherited a bloated state, and we are gradually bringing it back to order. We did have a choice in this budget. We could have taken what I think would have been extremely dramatic moves to radically cut spending in a short period of time. And the judgment we collectively made as a cabinet was that that would be bad for New Zealand and New Zealanders. We're determined that we can get the books back in order while staying the course with Kiwis. That means keeping in place our social safety net, continuing to fund the schools and hospitals on which we all depend, and we can do that and get the books in order if we're careful, if we're disciplined. And what you've seen today is the dawn of a new age in which governments don't just add another layer of spending in every budget, but instead, in every budget, they start first by saying, what is the money that is already there delivering? What should be reprioritised? How can we get the most bang for our buck? Amelia.
Thank you.
I'm glad that I'm delivering happy surprises today.
In BFO, despite the $2.9 billion in tax cuts to landlords, rents are forecast to keep rising rapidly. So have your landlords' tax cuts failed in their objective?
No, they haven't, because the alternative is that rents would have risen faster. And so we know that our policy is putting downward pressure on rents. I would be the first to say that that policy is not enough to deliver the more affordable housing that New Zealanders deserve. We have a comprehensive set of policies for delivering that. I'm going to invite you, Chris Bishop, just to talk a little about our approach to housing.
Sure, thank you, Minister of Finance. Ultimately, the long-term driver of making housing more affordable for New Zealanders is our comprehensive Going for Housing Growth Plan, which has 3 core elements. The first is smashing the urban limits that hold our cities back from growing, both at the edge of our cities and inside our cities. We are working at pace on that. You will know that that's a Q2 commitment of the Prime Minister. Alongside that, we'll be delivering our commitment to the ACT Party around making the MDRS optional for cities that are choosing to use it. We are also hard at work improving the settings around infrastructure funding and financing for councils, but more broadly as well, because that is a big constraint on getting new houses built. And then finally, we are focused on the incentives acting upon councils so that we can change the political economy away from hostility towards housing growth towards positive embrace of housing growth. Those 3 elements working together will ultimately lead to a big supply of new houses. That is the medium-term answer to lowering rents, but also lowering house prices in real terms so that more New Zealanders can get access to housing. The budget, as the Minister has outlined already, contains $140 million that's been announced already, funded $140 million for 1,500 new social housing places, which is funded from reprioritising the first home grants. And as the Minister has said, this is a budget where we have made some tough decisions and reprioritised low-value expenditure to high-value expenditure. My own view is that when you weigh up first home grants compared to providing stability of funding for the community housing sector to provide social houses for often quite vulnerable New Zealanders, the choice is a pretty easy one, and we have made that choice.
Katie.
Sorry,
I'm going to go to Katie. That was a long answer. We can come back later. Katie?
Sorry, Amelia, sorry. There's quite a long list in here of fiscal risks, time-limited funding, including on things like plans to decrease spending on emergency housing. Given you plan to decrease the operating allowance, do you accept that you may have to spend more in the next couple of years? What will it take for you to have to do that, to pump more money in?
We are going to have to manage all of those fiscal challenges very carefully. It's going to require ongoing discipline. You will have noticed that the list of fiscal risks has reduced. There are fewer today than there were when we came to office. And that's because we've removed some liabilities from the books that the previous government had in place, whether it was the Auckland Light Rail project, Three Waters, or other projects they had that had significant fiscal risks associated with them. Our approach is this: we will always prioritise investments in frontline services. And what that means is that we will have to be in a constant process of reducing risks elsewhere, evaluating what investments will make the biggest difference, and ensuring that we're looking for waste and rooting it out.
And just on the plan to increase visitor levies and immigration fees, can you talk us through how much those might increase by? Are you worried, for instance, it might have an effect on tourism, given the importance of that to the economy?
Yeah, look, we've weighed up those two things carefully. National campaigned on a policy of user pays immigration levies. This brings us into line with most countries in the world, where people who are choosing to immigrate to New Zealand will pay the cost of processing their immigration application. We think that's fair. We don't think it makes sense for taxpayers to be subsidising that cost, and the levies that we're proposing bring us broadly in line with Australia. The second area is the international visitor levy, which we have been consulting on. The principle there is a simple one, which is that tourists coming to New Zealand have an exceptional experience. And part of that experience is experiencing the conservation estate and our local regions and communities. By having a fair levy, we can make sure that tourists are contributing to keeping up our national parks and keeping regional infrastructure going. Joe.
Minister, would you have to borrow as much and would you return to surplus faster if you weren't giving these tax cuts?
Well, Joe, the alternative would be a bigger operating allowance. We are delivering in this budget a smaller operating allowance than was planned by the outgoing government. And even so, with less new spending, we are still able to offer tax relief. And actually, this is about priorities, because I have heard a lot of people talk about the cost pressures that exist for government agencies and the situation that exists for consultants and contractors. And my view is that as a government, our priority should be New Zealanders, whose back pockets have been a heck of a lot lighter in recent years, and they have waited at the back of the queue while beneficiaries have faced increases, consultants have faced increases, agencies have faced increases. Well, it's time taxpayers got their fair share.
Can I also just ask, the operating allowances which you've mentioned there in future years obviously going to be much lower. Is this going to be a case where people will continue to get tax cuts, but basically it will mean that you can't do more, you can't give that extra boost in other core areas and they will see themselves missing out there?
We will be able to keep making boosts in other areas as long as we're careful and disciplined and keep reprioritising. You've seen, for example, we've made an upfront commitment that there will be at least half of next year's operating allowance committed to a boost in health funding. We've made that commitment because we know it will continue to be important. What we've also experienced in just our first 6 months in government is that by going through the spending that's already there, we've found many, many areas that represent lower value than the things we know New Zealanders care about. And I think that if we continue this practice in the coming months, we will be able to free up more funds for schools, for police, for hospitals, for doctors, for the things that really count. Ben.
Thanks, Minister. I'm interested in the inflation forecasts from Treasury. They're coming back into the target band a quarter earlier. Do you believe them?
Well, I've become very humble in this role because what I have learned is that there are things we can control and there are things that we can't control. We are, in this budget, doing what we can to reduce pressure on inflation. And we are reducing the contribution that fiscal policy is making to inflationary pressure. And we see risks to the inflation outlook as Treasury outline in their documents. But we know that keeping that square focus on inflation reduction is the very important part of how we'll deliver a lower cost of living for New Zealanders. Ultimately, of course, the Reserve Bank is responsible for getting New Zealand back to that inflation target, but we're doing our bit. Yes. Yep. Sorry.
Minister, New Zealand First is a big winner here. You're funding 500 new police officers, Shane Jones's Regional Infrastructure Fund, and making minimal cuts at MFAT. Have you essentially just written Winston Peters a blank cheque?
We have advanced priorities we think New Zealanders share, and we've delivered on key parts of our coalition agreements. I think it'd be difficult to find a New Zealander who thinks it's a bad idea to add 500 frontline police. I think the investment in climate adaptation and regional growth through the Regional Infrastructure Fund makes really good sense. And we've also said we're a government that's committed to growing international trade and connections, and so it makes sense to have a well-resourced Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Trade.
Yes. Kia ora, Minister. Kia ora over here.
Kia ora.
Kia ora tēnā koe. According to the latest statistics, 1 in 5 New Zealanders are Māori. Is this a fair divvying up of the budget this year? And also, if I can get a comment from Shane Jones in Te Reo Māori in regards to his Regional Infrastructure Fund. But can we start with you first, Minister?
Yes, this is a budget that delivers for Māori. Because when a New Zealander turns up at the emergency room or when a child starts school, they don't turn up thinking about their ethnic identity, they turn up thinking about their need. And in our budget, we're ensuring that resources are going where the need is, including in our hospitals and our schools and our police force. And so we're confident that we will be delivering for Māori. Māori have been some of the worst affected by the cost of living crisis. The previous government allowed inflation to spiral out of control, and that hurt Māori badly. We are getting the books back in order and managing the economy better, and every New Zealander stands to gain from that. We want to see the Māori economy continuing to grow and thrive. We want Māori families experiencing greater incomes and experiencing better services. And I believe our budget will deliver those things. Shane.
I just want to remind everyone that as we're sitting here, 60% of New Zealand children of Māori descent are not going to school more than 90% of the time. 40% of people on the job seeker benefit are of Māori extraction. These are problems that will be dealt with when the state is redirected, better run, and focused on systemic improvements. Yes, there is a place for targeted interventions, and one of them that Mr. Bishop and I are working on follows on the work that National previously did to work with Māori communities, including the Ratna settlement. And we're going to take a report shortly on that. But folks, these systemic challenges confronting the Māori segment of our population, when you look at those woeful stats, need more than a brown dot approach. Mo te wahanga, ki te kaupapa, mo te pūtea ki tua whenua, hāngai tonu ki ngā pāpāringa o ngā awa, engari ka mahitahi mātou, me ngā umanga, me ngā kamupene Māori, mā rātou anō e whakamahi i o rātou taonga, ngātahi me mātou te krauna, ka tei ka whakarane te painga mō ngai Māori kei tua whenua. Thank you.
I'd also point out that the decision to save Te Matatini regional funding is a great one, and it shows our government's commitment to celebrate Te Reo Māori, kaupapa Māori, the Māori arts, and we're looking forward to attending those festivals. Brad.
Minister, you're running effective zero budgets almost with the pullback in the operating allowance, but you've still got net core crown expenditure going to only 31% of GDP. Did you consider staggering the tax cuts or making deeper cuts, and in fact in the future will you have to make further cutbacks as well, given just how sort of tight the budgets will be?
Look, as I've communicated over the past few months, the staggering thing that happened as we came into office was not only did we find government books with lots of holes in them, we also had revealed to us by our forecasters a picture of an economy growing much slower than we had hoped. And so when you look at those statistics, things like debt as a proportion of GDP or spending as a proportion of GDP, the important thing to remember is that the size of GDP has shrunk in the forecast period. So our job is not to sit back and just accept that, but is actually to drive for growth. And that is what our government's policy agenda is about. It is about enhancing productivity growth, New Zealanders' incomes, making it easier for people to invest, getting rid of red tape, bringing in fast-track consenting so we can get nation-building projects away, ensuring that we're educating our people better so that they have the skills to contribute to a wealthier economy. So actually, one of the biggest things we can do is drive growth. That's what will make those figures better in the future. Yes.
Talofa, Minister. Now, we've seen a boost in the previous budgets for Pacific Wellbeing, but not in this budget, but only cuts to programs such as Tuputai, which are very beneficial to Pacific youth. Why is there no investment for Pacific peoples in this budget?
I just utterly reject that. There is significant investment in this budget for Pacifica people. Through our health services, where we will continue to fund and indeed increase funding for Pacifica health providers, and our education system, where we will continue to fund education for Pacifica young people, including through Pacifica language nests and early childhood education. This is a budget that is all about making people genuinely better off. It's not a budget all about the glossy word well-being sprayed everywhere. It's about actually delivering. And look, in relation to the Taputai program, I just note that program continues. We've simply reduced some of the funding, which we have been advised we can do without compromising that program.
Isn't this reflective of the Pacific community's concerns with the lack of advocacy for Pacific, seeing that there's no Pacific MPs in this government?
Well, look, I can assure you that Dr. Reti, in his role as Minister for Pacific Peoples, is a strong advocate for Pacific people. I'd also note that our Minister of Foreign Affairs values very deeply our relationships with our Pacific neighbours and is another voice at the Cabinet table that often reminds that doing well by Pacific people is a really important part of what our government is doing. Yes, at the back. I'm sorry, I can't quite. Oh, it's Mark. Mark.
Kia ora, Minister. Just further to Joe's question, assuming that the savings and new revenue initiatives that are funding the tax cuts are worthwhile sort of adventures on their own, you had the choice to put that money towards tax cuts or to use it to pay down debt. So was there ever any stage where you considered reducing the scale of the tax cuts or otherwise putting that funding towards paying down debt and running getting closer to surplus?
We had the choice to break our promise to New Zealanders, and we chose not to do that. Lloyd. I'm worried you're going to mock me for my use of song lyrics, but I...
No, don't worry. That time has passed. But Florence and the Machine is very nice. One of the first things you did as Finance Minister was scrap IREX. And I see, based on what I've seen in here, there's nothing really in here about the resilience of the Cook Strait crossing. All there is $600,000 looking at an ocean-going tug. Is that the solution, is to have old, unreliable ferries and you're going to buy essentially an ambulance that's going to rescue them when they break down on the Cook Strait? Or is there a long-term plan that you're looking at?
Yes, we are looking at a long-term plan, and we remain ready to invest in a ferry solution for the Cook Strait. That is one of the reasons why we have left a generous amount of funding in the multi-year capital allowance. There's $7.5 billion there, factored into our fiscal plan. When we get an investable business case for the Cook Strait, we will invest in it, and we have the funds to ensure that we can. Max.
Minister, on the three official measures of child poverty in the documents, for one of them there's no projection about what will happen. For the second one, the projection is basically the rates of child poverty stay the same. And on the third measure, the projection is that they will get worse. How can you deem your budget a success when there will be no reductions in the number of children living in child poverty?
Well, I see it differently. If you look at the graphs on the back of the Child Poverty Report, you can see very clearly that as a consequence of our tax package, child poverty will be less than it would otherwise have been by at least one of those measures. And what I'd say to you is that a budget that ensures that New Zealanders, particularly those with young children, are getting more income is a budget that is good for children. We are ensuring that parents can get a rebate on their early childhood education fees, but we're also a government that has a fundamentally different approach when it comes to how we lift New Zealanders out of material deprivation. It is our view that the best way to do that is to move people out of welfare and into work. And our Better Public Service target commits us to that goal, and we want to lift children out of the poverty that comes with welfare dependence. We also, in this budget, have a commitment to the social investment approach, which we think will go a lot further to break cycles of disadvantage that for too many generations have trapped too many children in poverty. Anna.
Minister, just on the prescription changes for under 14s, what was the thinking behind remaining free for that age group? Will the prescriptions charges be enforced from July 1 or July 31st, and will keeping it free for under 14s impact the 13 cancer drug payments from next year?
The change occurs from July 15. We have chosen to retain free prescriptions for under 14-year-olds over 65s for community service card holders. But also critically, Dr. Retty has been working hard on getting changes to the IT systems that pharmacists use so that high health users can automatically get free prescriptions once they've had 20 prescriptions in a year. That's in a household for families. So I think he wants to talk some more about that in the coming days. Look, our focus has been about ensuring that children and young people can get those free prescriptions, that older New Zealanders and high health need users can get those free prescriptions. As I said earlier, we remain committed to making more cancer drugs available as we campaigned on in the National Party, and we will be able to do that in future budgets. Jenna? Good question. This is something I've talked a lot with officials about. Essentially, we were advised that if we were to make the tax changes tonight with our budget legislation and ask payroll providers to get those changes in place by 1 July, that there were real risks that they would not be able to make those changes in time, and there would be a risk to people getting underpayment of their tax relief. And so we listened to that feedback and have opted to take that extra 4 weeks to give payroll providers time to switch to the new system. It was consistent advice. I tested that advice. It will all be proactively released. You'll get to read it for yourself. This is just a matter of being practical. I was the opposition spokesperson when Grant Robertson ignored IRD advice about the problems that would occur with the cost of living payment, and I was reluctant to repeat those mistakes. Well, I think it's going to be a great day, Jenna, 31 July, when tax relief comes and it hits those payroll providers, and then within those next couple of weeks, it'll hit people's bank accounts. I think there's going to be a lot of New Zealanders who will enjoy that relief. Yes, Craig.
The back pocket boost, which you campaigned on, also included a change to the abatement thresholds for working families, but not till 2026. Is that still your intention?
No, it is not. We made that announcement following the formation of our coalition agreements. We acknowledged that due to changes in the way that we were funding our tax plan, there was one small change that we had to make, and that was it. Benedict.
The government's expecting a lot from the police when it comes to law and order, when it comes to tackling the gangs. Are you hoping that this budget goes some way to making things right when it comes to police pay?
Yes, I am. We've intentionally prioritised resources for the police, funding not only those extra officers, but also funding to help them with the many cost pressures that they face, upgrading their fleets, ensuring that there's a significant amount of funding to support higher pay rates for police. Look, we back the police. They do one of the hardest jobs in the country. They are brave women and men. They protect us and our communities, and we're on their side.
Ask about the health funding. You've mentioned those wait lists and trying to improve those several times. I mean, what would you like to see when a New Zealander gets sick? How long should they have to wait before they can see their doctor, if they go to A&E, before they can get help?
Well, we've set clear targets there to reduce those waiting times over time. And what we want to see is that New Zealanders are able to get those operations faster so that they're not off work, so that they're not unable to care for their children or their family members, so that they're not suffering really poor quality of life. And we know that that is partly about money, so that we can have the nurses and the doctors and the surgeons, but it's also about ensuring more innovation in our health system, more efficient flow-through in our theatres. And Dr. Reti is thinking very hard about that and working with some of the incredibly capable New Zealanders we have in our health system to speed things up. I've got someone at the back. I'm conscious that I've got about 3 more minutes. I'm going to take your question and then one more.
Kia ora, Minister. Terry Boucher. Just picking up on this point about the working for families and the threshold, that's 42,700. That has not been increased since July 2018. It means you increased the in-work tax credit, but you'd be taking it away for families who are only earning over 42,700. They face an effective tax rate of minimum 44.5%. So why has that been allowed to continue? You're basically asking these families, raising our future, tamariki, to pay for landlord tax cuts.
Well, I completely reject that assertion. We are increasing the in-work tax credit for low-income families. That is a significant commitment that we are making for the very families that you are talking about. We've also ensured that there has been an increase to the minimum family tax credit so that there is always an incentive to move from welfare into work. And we have ensured that our tax package provides specific relief to families with young children through the Family Boost payment. So this is actually a budget that focuses many billions of dollars more into families with children than it does to owners of rental property. Last question, I'm going to give it to a journalist, Barry. He's back.
Just as a follow-up to Lloyd's question, Minister, the break fee, the contract break fee with the Koreans, what is that going to cost?
We still don't know. It's still subject to commercial negotiation. When that negotiation is complete. And one of the rules of a negotiation is if you don't have to, you don't give it a deadline. We've gone for the midpoint on what we're consulting, so $70 million. Sorry, I've given you the wrong number, $70 rather than 70 million. Forgive me, it will be in the estimates, but we've used the $70 midpoint. Yeah. Okay, thanks everyone. Obviously, I'll be available for many more questions over the coming hours and days, and enjoy reading the documents. Thank you very much.